Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I have finally picked a Western hunting rifle and scope combination. And at the end of today's video, I'm going to show you that rifle and scope. But first, let me go through and talk about the different options that I considered and what went into making the decision. So first we'll talk about the rifle and then we'll talk about the optic I put on top of it. When I started looking for a rifle to take out west, I knew I wanted something lightweight, something that would punch a little bit heavier than 6.5 Creedmoor, which is was my next best option, and something that wasn't super long. I didn't want a 26-inch barrel on anything because I do plan to hunt with my suppressor in place. So that was the other criteria, that it had to be able to accept a suppressor. The caliber I chose was .280 Ackley. The main couple reasons for that decision are, it's a fairly fast, flat-shooting caliber, hits quite a lot harder, carries quite a lot more energy than the 6.5 Creedmoor, and I could find it in a couple of fairly lightweight rifles. The other major deciding factor was that I could find components to load .280 Ackley. Probably my preferred cartridge would have been 7 SAUM, but components, brass mainly for 7 SAUM, is almost impossible to find, and there's not many manufacturers that chamber rifles for it. So that kind of made me lean towards the .280 Ackley even more. .280 Ackley is a long action cartridge as opposed to short action, which does mean that it's probably going to need a little bit longer barrel length to get the velocities that I'm wanting to have the kind of knockdown power we're looking for. So when I started looking at rifles chambered in .280 Ackley, their availability is hit and miss. The main rifle that I had been looking at was the Savage 110 Ultralight. Let me put a picture of that up on the screen for you to see here. Really good specs on the 110 Ultralight, and from what I was seeing, most guys were having really good luck with the accuracy in that particular rifle. I think it came in somewhere right at 5.5 pounds, and has a proof carbon fiber barrel on it. The only problem with that particular rifle is it came in 22 inches. That was the only barrel length that you could get. And because this is a long action cartridge, and I want to be able to get that bullet going fairly fast, to have a flat trajectory out to longer distances, maxing out around 400 to 500 yards, I wanted that little extra barrel length. That Savage 110 was running around $1,500 after tax and everything, tax, transfer fees, all of that. So that was my first option, and the one I just about ordered several times. The next option that I kept finding in stock, of course, I think there was a Weatherby Mark V in .280 Ackley, but that's way outside my price range. But another rifle that came and went in and out of stock several times while I was looking at it is the Browning X-Bolt. Multiple varieties of the Browning X-Bolt are chambered in .280 Ackley, and I saw several of them. They've got the X-Bolt Hell's Canyon Max Long Range, and all their names are long. The one that I was most interested in was the X-Bolt Hell's Canyon Speed, because it came with a very light barrel. I think 6.15 pounds is the spec for the weight of the gun itself. And it came in a 24-inch option with a threaded barrel. So that kind of met all of my specs. Maybe not as light as the Savage 110, but it kind of hit all of the other markers and was still fairly light and compact. I looked on and off. Sportsman's Warehouse had one in stock that they said was a 26-inch barreled model, and I kept looking at it, And it didn't make any sense to me because every other listing I saw for the X-Bolt Hells Canyon Speed in 280 Ackley was a 24-inch barrel. I went to Browning's website and looked at it. The only thing I could see that they had was a 24-inch barrel. So I called Browning. I gave them the item number that Sportsman's Warehouse listed, the manufacturer's item number, and they said, yeah, we never made a 26-inch barreled version of the Hells Canyon Speed. He said all of those rifles were 24 inches. So I thanked him, hung up the phone, and hit the order button. The benefit of Sportsman's Warehouse to me is that I could have it shipped to the nearest Sportsman's Warehouse, which is about 2.5 hours from where I live, but fairly close to a place that I work often in South Haven, Mississippi. And South Haven, Mississippi has a much lower tax rate than Tennessee, where I live, so that was a benefit as well. I got to pay Mississippi taxes instead of Tennessee taxes for the purchase of this rifle, and I believe it came to be just under, I think it was $11.76 was the price all told, which was a lot cheaper than it would have been shipped to my local gun shop and paying Tennessee tax, and certainly a lot cheaper than the $1,500-ish that I would have had to pay for the Savage 110 Ultralight. So that made my decision on that. Now for the scope that I really wanted, the Vortex Razor HD LHT, which is a super lightweight scope, and it has an illuminated center dot on the reticle that can be activated just by hitting a button on the side. That scope was really close to the top of my list for its lightweight and having the red dot in the center. That sounded like the perfect combination between being able to shoot long range with it and also being able to take a quick offhand shot in low light with that red dot if necessary. I did look at several other models of scope. Pretty much everything that Leupold offered I looked into. I looked seriously at the VX3 HD, which was running around the $700 to $800 price range, maybe a little bit lower, but that's $700 range for the side focus model. And that looked like a really good option. But I went to a store and handled some of those, and the reticles just weren't what I wanted at all. There were a couple reticle options that the reticles were just super thick and took up way too much room, I thought, in the field of view. Their field of view itself wasn't that great. The glass quality was good from what I could tell, but they just didn't seem like what I was looking for. I wanted an MOA-based reticle for one, and that turned me off of some of the Leupold Mark III scopes because those are only in MRAD. So even though the Leupold scopes were lighter and a little bit cheaper than the Vortex scope, I was looking really hard at that Razor HD LHT. There's so many acronyms, I lose track of a lot of them. But I think that stood for the lightweight hunting tactical. Anyway, really nice looking scope. I never got to see one in person, but that was at the top of my list. The trouble with that scope is it was available, but it was $1,200 for the scope, and I really didn't want to spend that much money. So I started looking at some of the other Vortex scopes that were available. I have a lot of the Vortex Viper line, and I like them a lot. I've got a Vortex Viper PST and an HST as well, both think in 6 to 24 by 50. The PST might be 5 to 25, I can't remember for sure. But anyway, I like those scopes quite a lot. And I like their Diamondback Tactical that I have in 4 to 16 by 44. That scope, though, is just a little too heavy for what I was wanting. I don't remember the weight on that. The Vipers, I know, both of those that I have are just way too heavy to put on this rifle. What I did find was Vortex they've got a couple different models of their Viper HS scope. So they've got the HS the HST and the HSLR. I think the difference between the HST and the HSLR is the HST has an exposed windage turret, whereas the HSLR does not. For this application, I did not need the exposed windage turret. Having an exposed elevation turret is great. That means I can quickly dial in elevation for longer distance shots and easily see where I am at on the elevation range on that turret. So that's the scope I went with. The Viper HSLR in 4-16, I think by 44. It might be 42, not 100% sure on that. But let me show you how that whole package ended up looking. So here it is, and this is a beautiful gun. The camo pattern and the burnt bronze Cerakote that are on here go really, really nicely together. I'll do more of an in-depth review of this particular rifle at another time, but for now, that's what I'll tell you about it. It's a beautiful rifle, and it seems like it's going to shoot really well. I've taken just a few shots with it to break in the barrel, and it has shot really nicely so far. The one thing I will say that I did not know about this rifle that I wish I would have known before I purchased it is the threads on the barrel are completely non-standard. You see I've got a muzzle device here and a thread adapter. The threads for the Browning X-Bolt Hell's Canyon Speed were M13 by 0.75, I believe. Nobody that I could find makes muzzle devices in that threading, and rugged suppressors, which I use and have to have their muzzle devices to work with the suppressor, didn't make an adapter in that size. So I ended up just ordering a thread adapter from Silencer Central, and I'm hoping that this is going to work out. I do have a little bit of grace room, being that it's a 30 cal can and this is a 284 diameter bullet going through it, so there's a little bit of grace room if things aren't perfectly square, but from what I can tell, it all looks really good. There's a little more weight out on the end of the gun than I initially wanted. That adapter probably added a full ounce or a little bit more. I should actually weigh that and find out. Anyway, but it added an ounce and probably 7/8 of an inch to an inch of length, which is a little crummy. And I really, really wish Browning would have put standard threading on the end of this barrel. I believe their new version of this gun has standard threads on it. I think they say suppressor ready or something like that, and they put 5/8 24 threads on it, but this one was not. And had I known that before I bought the rifle, which they don't advertise the thread diameter, by the way, you have to go digging through forums, or maybe, I'm sure if you called them, they'd probably tell you, but they don't have their thread diameter listed anywhere that I could find on their website or on any of the sale listings. So that is the one huge downside to this rifle that I've found so far, and it is going to increase the length just a little bit. The scope, I think, looks really sharp on there. It's probably a little bit bigger physically than a lot of folks would run on a lightweight rifle like this, but I think it came in at 4 ounces heavier than the Razor HD LHT that I really wanted to put on there. So the weight difference is not gigantic. And I really like the scope so far. The reticle is nice and sharp. It is a wire reticle and not an etched reticle. I would prefer an etched reticle. But it is a wire reticle, and I've had really no trouble with that on my Viper HST that I've got on my 308. That, I think, is just about going to do it for the rundown of this rifle and scope package. Oh, one thing I should mention while I'm talking about the muzzle. This gun did come with a thread protector, correctly threaded, and also came with a radial brake that was just about the same length, maybe just a tad shorter than the setup that I have on here right now. So it did kind of have one of those omnidirectional muzzle brake sort of things on the end, and it did, at least in my brief 10 shots or so, getting the barrel broken in, it did reduce the recoil quite a bit. Even though 280 Ackley is not terrible on recoil. It's less recoil than a 30-06. But anyway, we'll talk about all that later. We are going to be doing full load workups, probably with a couple of different bullets for this rifle, coming very shortly. I'm going to get started working on this pretty quickly. I've got a couple of weeks until spring bear season, which is where I plan to hunt with this first. And I'm super excited about seeing how this thing shoots with a couple of different bullets. The loads we're going to be working up are going to be probably for the 145 grain Barnes LRX and also the 150 grain Sierra Game Changer, which I was able to get my hands on. So that's going to do it for the initial look at the gun and scope I chose for Western backpack hunting. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to stay tuned. We're going to be doing a lot with this gun in the coming weeks. Again, thanks for watching, and y'all have a good one.